All right. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the University Preparatory Academy plan for a safe return to in-class learning. Again, my name is David Porter. I'm the Executive Director at UPA. Very proud to be part of this community. But before we get going, there's just a couple things we want to make sure we take care of. One is if you have not put your phone or computer on mute, if you could do that so that we can make sure we get to the meeting. If you have questions, please, the whole point of today's meeting is to really get your feedback, to hear your thoughts, and to get the questions answered as quickly as possible so that you feel like you know everything that you need to know. So please use the chat feature to include the questions, and Ms. King will be assisting me in answering questions. We will take some time throughout the whole process to be able to answer questions as we go along. So there's specific points where we'll stop and address any questions that are in the chat. And if we don't get to your question today, we will catalog them and answer them and post them on our website and send them out to you so that every answer is, that every question does have an answer. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. What I do know as of yesterday, and remember that this is a very fluid situation and there's new information every single day. But what we know as of today is that school is definitely starting on August 13th. School will look different when it does open. But the important thing is that we have worked with the County Office of Ed and health departments, and they have revised their protocols. We're adjusting our protocols currently for in-class learning. In-class learning will be hybrid, meaning that in order to make sure we social distance in the classroom and on the campus, only half of the students will be on campus on any given day. And we'll talk more about each one of these in just a few minutes. What I can tell you is that the staff and the campus is prepared, and we have I think a pretty comprehensive plan to be able to make hybrid or in-class learning safe and effective. So you'll be able to see more about that plan and ask questions about that as we go along. Every single day we are dedicated to making sure that we get closer to making that plan come to reality. Today we were again walking through the campus, putting up one-way signs, putting up floor signs, and making sure that we really see the flow of school. And we're also in classrooms creating socially distanced safe spaces. What I can tell you is that the thinking and the processing and the community meetings really mean that we're prepared to create a safe learning environment for students, staff, and the community. And I want to underline something that's really important. This isn't just about ensuring the safety of your child. This isn't just about ensuring the safety of our staff. It's also to ensure that when our staff members go home or when our students go home, that we're responsible for making sure that nothing goes home with them and that we are protecting you and your loved ones at home. It's a true community, and we're trying to keep that in the front of our mind as we come up with our plans and make the decisions. So we're not just thinking about the people who are going to come onto campus, but those loved ones that are at home, especially those that are immunocompromised in any fashion. Those are of great concern, and my heart goes out to the 130,000 families who have been having to deal with the loss of a loved one due to COVID. And I know that we are fastly approaching over 300,000 confirmed COVID cases in California. It's a serious illness, and we want to make sure that we take it with all of the seriousness that comes with making sure that we create a safe space for your child. It's important to remember that we are a community, and what really makes me happy every single day and which keeps driving me towards this work is that this is about making sure everyone in the community is safe. And that we all pull together. And as we go through the protocols and we ask people to live with the requests or the guidelines, we hope that, and we ask that we all pull together. in that we actively participate. And so as we look at these, look at from the lens of not only we're asking people to wear masks, it's not about the individual. When I wear a mask, I'm not thinking about myself. When I'm wearing a mask, I'm thinking about your child, and I'm thinking about you, I'm thinking about our staff, and I'm thinking about the loved ones at home. And that's why I wear a mask. It's not about me as the individual. I'm not protecting myself as much as I want to make sure I'm protecting those around me. And the staff and the administration of the school are dedicated to leading by example. So again, the actions and decisions we discussed today and we hear from you today come with that lens. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. There are some best practices that are just really important to be able to make sure that we have a level playing field in terms of making sure every classroom is truly taken care of. Personal protective equipment, PPE, making sure that everyone has that equipment. There's personal hygiene practices. We're going to have to teach people how to cough, how to remind people how to wash their hands, and talking about social distancing. It's going to take a lot of thinking and practice. Social distancing is important, and we're going to practice that in the classroom, in the hallways, and in our open spaces. Regular deep cleaning protocols, that includes hourly cleaning, and everyone is going to participate in that cleaning. In the education, making sure that we have the most current information and that we are responding to everything as quickly as humanly possible, and providing transparency in our communication when it comes to making sure that families know what's happening. Enacting all of the preventative measures. Students and staff should be regularly checked for flu-like symptoms. And so we're going to be checking everybody for temperature and asking them the protocol questions that are outlined in the guide that I sent out a few weeks ago, and then sent out the adjusted version today. And then we also want to make sure that we have a plan in place to respond to potential individual illnesses, or in the case that there's a school-wide quarantine, that we're prepared to move into distance learning as seamlessly as possible without losing out on the academic side pieces that come with distance learning. The plan today is broken up into the 5 different basic areas: the facilities, the instruction, staffing protocols, student and family protocols, and then what are we going to do in the case that someone contracts COVID, explains that they've are quarantined, and or if there's a county outbreak of COVID. So we'll start today with talking about facilities, and this is really about making sure that we have the structures in place so that when your student or you arrive on campus, that you see that we're creating a safe space. The first thing I want to talk about is the one-way flow and traffic pickup and drop-off. So what you'll notice is that we have separated by grade level, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in depth. But in order to spread people out around the campus, we have 3 different pickup and drop-off locations. And then while students are on campus, we're going to have a one-way traffic plan, meaning that students will move around the campus. And this is just one of the many maps that we have where we have students moving around the campus in one single direction. And the reason we have that is to be able to reduce as much opportunities for cross contamination or people bumping into each other. It's a lot easier to keep social distancing one-way traffic than it is in two-way traffic. Making sure that we do daily temperature screening and scanning for temperature, but also screening in terms of asking if anyone has flu-like symptoms, cold-like symptoms, if anyone in their family has COVID, been exposed to COVID, been in self-quarantine. And we'll be asking those questions and asking families to reinforce it at home as well. Hygiene and social distancing enforcement, again, washing hands, social distancing, keeping that distance. And we're asking that students wear masks, and we'll talk about masks in a little bit. And keeping the hallways clear at all times. And what that's gonna take though, is it's gonna take increased supervision during all times of the day. And what I wanna just kind of talk about real quick when it comes to that is we mapped this out. And as soon as I mapped this out, and we put all the one-way signs out, and we kind of figured all that out. I was feeling really good about our system and our flow, and it's like we really nailed it. And that was until I went to Safeway to pick up a few items for work, and I didn't pay attention to one of their one-way signs. I didn't see them. I had my mask and I was doing all the other pieces, but I didn't see those signs. And what that reminded me of is that it's not just putting the signs up and saying we have one-way traffic, but it's also about having the supervision and the patience to constantly remind people until we get into that practice. So I have been practicing our one-way pathway from my office whenever I need to go to another part of the campus. So I get into that pattern and that we do lead by example. When it comes to breaks before school or after school, we've had to designate some specific areas so that we do social distance during break and lunch. And so those boxes in red are those safe spaces, and there's a certain number. We can have up to 30 students in each one of those boxes and still be able to social distance with the 6 foot in between. And that goes for tables and chairs and all of the outdoor equipment. The boxes in yellow represent the areas where staff will have to move their parking. And so you'll notice that we have expanded the area where students can be during break or lunch. When students are getting their food, we will have social distancing lines, meaning the students will be waiting in, with space. And we're still partnering, as we've talked about before, around My Green Lunch. And if you haven't heard about that yet, we want to be able to provide a hot lunch option for families. And the great thing about My Green Lunch is that it comes prepackaged. It is absolutely safe. They have met all of the COVID protocols, the FDA protocols, and the CDC protocols. And this is a great way to ensure that your students could get food during the day and reduce any potential areas of contamination. There's also increased supervision and enforcement of hygiene and social distancing protocols after school and during lunch. Then finally is for the 2 or 3 days that we do have rain, we do have inclement weather in California, but we do have to have a plan for how or where students would go in case that it is raining, they cannot be outside. And so we'll have to start to use our classroom spaces, and that's going to increase the amount of cleaning that we do in those instances where there's inclement weather. The picture that you see here is one of the classrooms that has just been preset for distance learning. So you'll notice that there is tape on the floor and the little measuring tape there just to show that we have measured in all 3 directions to make sure that students are safe in a classroom. Teachers and students will not be able to move the desks or readjust those rooms because they've already been determined. That's going to change the teaching style a little bit. And the reason why is we have so many amazing staff members who are great at getting really collaborative experiences. And we're going to have to shift those great collaborative experiences into more electronic-based collaborations. At the end of each hour, teachers will be walking around and they will be using a spray to be able to clean all of the different desks and chairs. Students will be asking to use paper towels to clean only their specific area and to ensure that the area is safe as they leave the classroom. We'll be removing any sort of lounge or cloth material furniture. And in some cases, it's going to take the removal of desks, extra desk bookcases or prep tables in order to create that maximum space. And then in our offices or shared spaces, we have max capacity. We've measured square footage. And so if you were to come meet with an administrator or a counselor, you will see that there's max capacity spaces and that when we are sitting to meet with people, that we're practicing that social distancing. Great things are coming from the community. A parent emailed me with some concerns and thought, hey, a best practice that they heard about was that if you leave the doors open during the day to the classrooms, it reduces the amount of surface contact by quite a bit. And so that's a best practice that we got from the community, from another parent, just like you. And we're able to put into practice, and that's what this meeting is about. Regular sanitation. So we talked a little bit about cleaning those spaces, but classrooms will be cleaned at the end of each period. Offices will be cleaned after every meeting, so every time someone comes in to share or use a space. Any of the shared spaces, such as our staff lounges, will be cleaned after every use. We have staff will be going around cleaning all doorways and handles, and that was a practice that we had started when COVID first started way back in February. And then all spaces are given a deep clean and aerosol preparation by the custodial team. All of these processes, and I just got to send a shout out to our custodial team because we have actually exceeded many of the requirements in terms of cleaning for our campus compared to many other school sites. When it comes to facilities, there are multiple questions that generally come up, and I'll answer the frequently asked ones and then get your feedback and your questions about facilities. What will break or lunch look like? And I won't go through all of these, but as students are outside and they're relaxing during break or lunch, we'll be reinforcing the proper use of PPE. If we have students who are trying to touch their mask or play with their mask or pull it down, we'll be asking them to put it back up. If they're not social distancing, we'll be reminding them to social distance. We'll have to remind them, and this is a difficult one, around no sharing. We were all raised with the same philosophy that sharing is caring. In this new world of COVID, not sharing is truly caring. And so it's just going to be important that at home we just reinforce that idea. That goes for food, drinks, school supplies, or even athletic equipment. There'll be outdoor sanitation stations, so students will be able to wash their hands while they're outdoors or on their way into the campus. And you will also see hand sanitizer inside every single doorway, every single classroom, and we'll be asking people to use that as much as possible. Students will not be allowed to hang out as they have in the past in the hallways. The areas are too small, they're enclosed, and the chances of droplets moving and being caught by other people are just too high for people to spend time talking and hanging out. And so during lunch, brunch, and throughout the day, the hallways will be clear. And then inside the Horton, we will encourage students to eat outside, but for those students who do need to eat inside, there will be some seating in the Horton auditorium, which is right over here. What about band, PE, and outdoor classes? During band classes, band's gonna look a little bit different. A lot of the practice of actually playing the music will most likely happen at home in a private space. But we're also looking at getting dividers, plastic dividers inside the Horton that would allow for the safe use of band equipment. But again, we have to get approval from the health department to make sure that we're approved. But what we'll most likely see is that band classes will be a lot about music theory during the class time. And then at home, there'll be a lot more practice than you might have heard before. PE classes will be all non-ball curriculum focused. So thinking about personal strength and endurance, running, non-weight bearing strength exercises. The PE classes will be held outside as much as possible. Mr. McMahon has already kind of been doing that in the past, and that will continue. Students will not be graded based on whether they change for PE or not. Although we do know that students, that there's another cleanliness aspect of being able to change for a PE class. Okay. And then we're going to encourage teachers and students to hold classes outdoors whenever weather is permitting. If you look at the picture, it's a little grainy, I apologize for that, but what you see is the 3 awnings that we are having installed as sunshades. And that is to encourage students to and classes to hold classes outdoors. And what we know from the CDC and what we know from the state health department is that it's a lot harder for the viral particles to travel when we are outside because there's a greater space. And that's one area that we're looking at. Here is another classroom. This is Miss Pettit's math class. And you can see again is that this is a slightly different setup, but still the rules are the same. The orange tape to place the students in the appropriate locations. What we'll be placing on top of each one of those desks is plexiglass walls. And that will help for those students with health issues when we talk about masks. Teacher desks, so you can see the teacher desk in the back. It is actually 6 feet away from any of the student seats. And they will also have plexiglass dividers. In some instances, students have personal questions or they want to ask a teacher something. And we want to be able to use that divider as a way to create a safe space for the staff and the student. Each room will have spare PPE, so that's gloves, masks, cleaning supplies, and the routine emergency supplies. So not only are we planning for a COVID response, but we're also planning for other emergencies as well. And then, like I said before, the rooms will be cleaned hourly, and then they're going to be deep cleaned every evening. And that is from our custodial team. UPA hallways can get crowded. How are you addressing that? And again, we've talked a little bit about the fact that everything has been placed as one-way hallways. And then we've just finished marking all the doors as entry or exit. And then we do have to increase the amount of staff to make sure that students are headed in the right direction. It's going to be pretty tempting to be really close to a classroom or to a bathroom and know that you have to walk a long way around to get to where you are going. But the purpose of that, again, is about making sure that the community is safe. This was a terrific question, and I wanted to make sure that I got this answered. This came up yesterday. What are the chemicals used for cleaning? And what I can tell you is that all chemicals used by UPA are approved by the FDA and CDC, and they are non-harmful, but still effective in eliminating COVID-19. And the aerosol that we use in the evening would eliminate any viral particle that is in the air during the spray. So the daily surface cleaners used in the classroom is a mixture of hydrogen peroxide and an organic alcohol similar to rubbing alcohol. The hydrogen peroxide will break apart the viral particle and disrupt the genetic material inside of the virus. The alcohol is just a way for an agent that will help dry the material quickly. And then obviously water is just another part of the cleansing material. The bathroom cleaners that we use is sodium bicarbonate or carbonate. The other major ingredient is sodium hypochlorite, which is basically bleach and water. So your normal Clorox cleaning materials that you use at home to clean your restrooms is the same thing that we'd be using for our bathroom cleaner. But there is perlite and bentonite, which is part of a deodorizer. If you ever looked at any armpit deodorizer or whatever. Windows and sneeze guards are cleaned with an organic alcohol, ammonium, and water combination, very similar to what you would use at home. And then the aerosol virucide, the stuff that we're spraying into the air. It's basically an ammonium and isopropyl alcohol. And again, the ammonium is designed to, similarly to the hydrogen peroxide, is that it disrupts the viral particle from its action of being able to bind to cells. Okay. I will drop off and pick up work. As you can see in the picture here, we're asking for families to drop off in 3 different locations on the campus. When you pull up to those drop-off locations, you're gonna see a tent, you're gonna see staff, you're gonna see stanchions and students queued up, socially distanced. And as they queue up, we'll be doing a very quick temperature check with either a touchless thermometer or a thermal imaging camera that would scan up to 15 students at one time for temperature. We're also going to ask them the 3 pre-screening questions, which is, do you have any cold or flu-like symptoms? Has anyone in your family contracted COVID? Or have you or anyone in your family self-quarantined due to potential COVID exposure? If the answer is to yes to any of those questions, we'll ask you to take the student home and self-quarantine. We'll talk about that at the end of the presentation today. We will be sending or providing you a placard that you can place in the front of your car, indicating which grade level, and so we can make sure to point you in the right direction. In the case that you have multiple children at different grade levels, we would just ask that you drop them off at the highest grade level. So if you have a 12th grader and a 9th grader, you would drop off at the 11 and 12, and the 9th grader would just go into the 11, 12 queue. And again, it's going to take extra staff for you and for everybody to kind of get used to this. We'll take a break, see what questions you have around facilities so far. So I'll ask Ms. King to help me out with that. I'm going to take a sip of water.
Awesome. So, Mr. Porter, will air purifiers be in the classroom or in the buildings as many windows don't open?
The air purifiers, like the ones that, like humidifiers or air purifiers, are not rated to remove COVID. And so that's why we have to go through the process of cleaning any sort of surface, and why we are why we're pushing so hard for everyone to use a mask.
Do we know whether the air spray is safe for asthma or potentially even causing asthma? If you go onto the FDA website and you can see the different chemicals and the different that I listed in this presentation, and you'll see that they do not induce asthma, and they don't cause asthmatic symptoms for those people who do suffer from asthma. But there are a lot of factors that will induce an asthma attack. They can be stress, and going into this situation could cause some stress for students. But we are specifically using chemicals that are harmless. Thank you. For bathrooms, how are they being cleaned, and what is the frequency of them being cleaned throughout the day? So they're going to be cleaned throughout the day. They're deep cleaned each evening, but throughout the day they're going to be sprayed with the ammonium cleaning agents several times throughout the day to reset them. It's just important, again, that students practice those hygiene protocols. They're washing their hands every time they go into that restroom. And what are procedures for students who drive to school? Where are they going to be parking? As well as, are kids allowed to walk or still bike to school? Yeah, students will be allowed to come to school in any fashion that they currently are. As an avid cyclist, let's keep biking. I love it. When they drop their bike off, the student, or they park their car, or they walk over from VTA or other public transportation, they would just walk over to the grade level check-in area that matches with their particular grade level. We want it to be as easy and simple for them as possible. Do we have a school nurse? We currently do not, but we are looking and reviewing our budget to see if we can contract with a nursing company to provide an on-campus nurse part-time. Perfect. And will students be moving, or will teachers be moving to them? That's a really fantastic question. Ideally, if you read the CDC guidelines, it's that students stay in one place and the teacher moves, and students stay in cohorts. That's been proven as an effective process. And that works great K through 6. The trouble we run into is that once we get to 7th grade, we have students who are taking, in the 7th grade, taking advanced math courses, and they might be mixing with older grade levels. The same is true at 8th grade, taking some high school courses in math, social science, or foreign language. And then when we get to grades 9 through 12, just about every single one of our electives is a mixed grade level. And so it's nearly impossible for us to be able to offer options and for students to take electives and keep them in a cohort. And not only that, but if you look at the different varying levels that students are in for mathematics, we see a wide variance in grade levels there as well. So our job is to then, if cohorts are not possible, what's the next best thing? And the next best thing is one-way hallways, not letting students hang out in the hallway before class, having to go directly into their seats, practice the social distancing, wear the mask, and making sure that students and teachers are cleaning their areas after every use.
Awesome. So how will open periods work for students who do not have a class?
Yeah, so we'll answer this question and give you some more information. Students at open periods, they have a classroom space. It's right next to the lobby called SF State. And we have personnel in that room to help students, remind them about social distancing. Some students think that they can leave during open period, and that is not the case. We are a closed campus, and once students are on campus, they need to stay on campus, and we have a room for them to study and work from. And that's an important part that we want to make sure that we get everyone on the same page about. I'd like to transition us now to what does instruction look like in this new paradigm that we're talking about. First of all, we are looking at and listening to you about your feedback from the last distance learning experience that we all went through. And part of the concern was that because the current learning management system had some issues with it, it created some headaches for families because we had teachers who wanted to be able to provide a rich learning experience, and I applaud them for their creativity. But what happened is that it was difficult for parents to support their students because students were in different platforms. The other aspect is that we need a learning management system that works with multiple different ways that students create work, whether that's through Google Docs, Office. But if you think about our world languages, is that we want students to be able to upload audio files, video files, PDFs, or pictures. And so we need a system that is robust and allows for students to interact with the teaching and learning environment and submit work in multiple different avenues or ways. We also want a platform for teachers to provide feedback. We need to get away from paper as an issue. Again, handing out lots of paper, that is a chance for cross-contamination. So we want to be able to make every classroom, even when students are in class, paper-free. And so the teachers are going to have to, we have to have a platform that allows for teachers to give feedback online. And it's got to be easy for you as a parent to be able to access and find out what those grades are and find out how the grading system works. And then we need an expanded student information system. And what we want to be able to do is to make sure that we track students with IEPs, ELs, struggling students. I'm going to take a quick break and I'm going to shut my door because we are doing a deep cleaning, and I'll be right back. They are doing an amazing job out there right now. You got to see it. Once we have that learning management system and we start talking about what is the best model for education, and what I said at the very beginning is we're going with a hybrid model. And how did we arrive at that decision is an important thing to understand. If you look at the top row, we see traditional block. That's the schedule that we are most used to. And what that means is a teacher would see their students 10 times per month for 900 minutes of class time per month. And that's a 4-week period. And that's the ideal. If I could wave a magic wand and make COVID go away, I would definitely do that. The next option is a block hybrid. So can we still keep the 90-minute period and still do a hybrid approach? What that does is it reduces the number of teacher-student contacts from 10 to 5 and reduces the amount of in-class learning minutes from 900 to 450. That doesn't, and then if you look at the number of distance learning days per month, it increases to 10. And so we end up losing a lot of instructional minutes in that block schedule. And sometimes your student would not see a teacher, probably could be for a week. The every period hybrid approach means that they are shorter periods, but there increases the number of teacher contacts per month to 10. And gets a little bit closer to the maximum number of learning in-class minutes. And that's why we ended up with that approach. The full distance learning model, meaning that the student stays at home, and that's what we just experienced, you saw the challenges with that. The most effective teaching system is to really have quality teachers who know our kids, who build off of the strengths that our students have, and are able to respond to all of the different cues that happen in a classroom. So how do we do that in a safe way? Okay, before your mind explodes, what we see here is a month-by-month breakdown of that hybrid system. This was feedback again from parents last night based on what we were providing as options, and in the last 24 hours, some new technologies became available that we could implement. We found out that they are feasible for us to implement. Your child would be broken up into an A group or a B group. And in the case that there's a family member who's in both groups, we would shift you over to one. As you can see, as A group days and B group days, with the exception of August, we'll talk about that in a minute, is that we would just alternate weeks. And what the feedback we got from families is that this is much easier to plan. You don't want to wake up on August 14th and look at your child and go, is this an A day or a B day? And do I get to get you to school in 4 minutes? And that's what we want to avoid. It's a lot easier to plan your life around this and to know that your child is going to be home this week. If that impacts work schedules, you can plan around this a lot easier. August, though, is a challenge. We have to make sure that our students, your children, are able to access all of the different technology pieces to make sure they're prepared. And so we're going to ask that we do an alternating schedule for 2 weeks so that we can make sure by August 28th, every student can log on to the learning platform, that they can use all of the different technologies, and that the teacher is confident the student knows how to log on, access the classroom environment, find where the work is, knows how to submit work. We want to be able to be prepared. You'll also notice that finals are now also in that schedule. You can see the number of holidays. And then there were 2 days, 1 day per semester, where all students would be at home and teachers would be running open tutoring throughout the day. And there's 1 day right near finals. It's just a catch-up day and a chance for open tutorial. Okay. This is the coolest thing. It was, again, brought to us by some families. And the concern was in our previous model was that we were losing and we were asking teachers to do a lot of heavy lifting. And this is going to solve a lot of problems for us. And it's called live streaming. It's similar to a Zoom, except for it's in a classroom setting. And so we are installing equipment, purchasing, installing equipment. And basically what this means is there will be a camera in each classroom, and it is fully trained on the teacher and the whiteboard or the front of the classroom. You will not actually be able to see students in the video. And what that means is if your child is at home, they'll be able to go onto the computer, see a live stream of what's happening in the class, be able to follow along with the instruction, do all of the same homework that the student or classwork that students in class are doing, and be able to submit work from home. And so what that means is the teacher doesn't have to develop two different simultaneous learning systems, one for students who are in class and those who are at home, and be able to keep students on the same page. We also just learned earlier today is that the platform that we're leaning towards right now does allow for students from home to ask questions and send those questions into the teacher during the lesson from home. And then when we start thinking about collaborative learning environments, it's quite possible that two students in class and two students who are home could be working together on a PowerPoint or a different type of project, even though they're not in the same room. The benefits of live streaming is it increases the amount of curriculum content and skills. We're talking about a 30 to 40% increase in the potential content versus other models of distance learning. It allows for students or classes to have self-quarantine to continue the lessons. It's not an if, it's a when. Someone, me, you, is gonna potentially have to self-quarantine because someone at work or someone out in our community or a family member contracted COVID, or we have to self-quarantine because there's a chance of contracting COVID. The live streaming for a student means if they're at home because they're quarantined, they just log on, they live stream, and their day continues unabated. It also allows for teachers who are self-quarantined or sick to teach from home. We'll put the substitute in the classroom to ensure the safety of the class, but we could just turn the video on and the teacher will be right there in the front of the room, just as if they were there in person. It allows for us to monitor attendance. This is a key piece because we had to figure out how we're going to be able to monitor attendance. The state still says we have to take attendance while students are at home. And then we talked about the idea of posting questions. And one of the biggest things is to make sure that students don't get lost in the system. Giving students work to do at home, say, good luck, go do it, get it done, bring it back the next day. That's not a very interactive experience for students. And so the live streaming allows them to continue to engage. And there's another hidden benefit, which is we can archive and record the lessons and students could go back and rewatch a lesson. For those of you who struggle with trying to mentor your student through math and that they give you that excuse of, well, that's not how the teacher showed me, it's gonna give you the power to be able to say, okay, well, let's go see how the teacher taught it and then be able to bring up that video. And that gets you out of the equation a little bit. Some key things that come along with live streaming. Is it secure? Yes. Everyone has to log in to a secure server. And the video cannot be copied from that server and shared out into the world. It's new though, and so it's going to increase the amount of IT or technical assistance to make sure that we resolve home issues or school issues immediately. And we're going to have to dedicate time in the beginning of the year, like we had talked about before with that calendar, to make sure everyone knows how to use that, including you. And then it's web-based. So we are having to triple our internet bandwidth to make sure that we have enough capacity to be able to send out 26 simultaneous live streams. So we're basically our own cable television company at this point. And to be able to upload information into the secure web. But here's the key piece. Not everyone has all of the technology at home to be able to access internet. We are here to help. And I just want to this is one area I really need families to help us out with. We have plenty of hotspots, laptops, and other technology resources and funding to help families prepare for distance learning. What I'm asking our families to do is to make sure that every family feels comfortable and is willing to access and ask for those resources. Not everyone feels comfortable in asking for help. We're here to help, and we're a community. So if you are encountering someone or know of someone who's challenged with asking for extra assistance, please send them our way. It's completely confidential. We have lots of different ways to help. Please help us help our community stay connected. We handed out multiple hotspots and over 70 laptops during the last distance learning experience, but we also knew that there were some families that we were struggling to get them the right information and the right technology. And so it's really going to take a community effort to make that happen. What's the bell schedule look like? Well, UPA has 7 periods. Most other schools only have 6. That's part of our strength, is that we can give a better rounded education to our students. We can go deeper into more curriculum. But what that means is that school next year will start at 8:15 and it'll end at 3:55 if they're attending all 7 periods. If they are attending 6 periods, they're done at 2:55. And what we're asking is that parents pick up their students as quickly as possible after the school is over to make sure that we are social distancing. I also just say it's a best practice. Have that hand sanitizer in the car, and the first thing a student does is they hand sanitize before they do anything else once they get in your vehicle. In the case that we do have tutoring, teachers know that they cannot have more than 12 people in the room, and that everyone has to clean up the space that they used during that tutoring hour. And then again, students will not be allowed to wait in hallways. So here's some of the questions that come up around instruction. What does it look like when I send my kid to school? What you're gonna see is teacher-led instruction. You're gonna see kids sitting in rows. It's so old school, but that's what we'll see. You'll see plexiglass walls on the desks. There will be peer-to-peer interaction. So they're gonna be communicating with each other, most likely through digital platforms, even though they're right next to each other. But with social distancing, they're gonna get teacher or peer tutoring with social distancing. They're going to review the previous day's work. They're going to prepare for the next day's work. There'll be proctoring of assessments like tests or quizzes, and attendance will be taken. What's it going to be like at home? Well, they're still going to follow the same bell schedule. It's just the commute's going to be a little bit shorter. They're going to wake up, go to the dining room table or wherever they have the laptop or the study area. They will log in to the learning management system, so wherever the assignments are located, they'll get the live stream link, and then they will be in class. They will follow the lesson. We're able to track when they log in, when they log out of those videos, and that's how we'll be taking attendance. They'll complete all assignments as if they were in the classroom, and they will digitally submit those assignments at the end of the class or when that assignment is due. They're also going to be asked to participate in virtual groups. It's quite possible that students would be working on a PowerPoint or some other project together with some students at home and some still at school. How do I know if my child's in an A group or a B group? Well, when we hand out schedules, which is coming around very soon, they will be placed randomly into A groups or B groups. If a family has multiple siblings, we will try to ensure that they're set in the same group to decrease the amount of transportation issues, but also to help with to eliminate any cross-contamination or exposure. We're not going, with 700 kids, if we get A group and B group 99% correct, that still means that there are going to be 7 or 10 kids out there who might be in the wrong group. Please communicate with us, reach out to Mr. Doherty if there is an issue with the schedule or an issue with the A group or B group, and we'll be more than willing to work with you and make that correction. This is going to be new for all of us, and so it's just important that we continue to communicate and work with each other. But help is only an email away. Last semester, there were some bugs with the distance learning system. Teachers were amazing dealing with some systems and bugs, and they had a million workarounds. But what we need is a system, and what we've identified as a system, and we'll be releasing that very soon once we complete all of our background tests. But it has to be a system that allows for teachers to grade, post assignments, put video tutorials up, give feedback, and potentially hold quizzes and tests and projects. It has to work with Google. We are a Google school, and it has to work with Google Classroom. Many of our teachers are great at Google Classroom, and I don't want to lose that learning experience for your student And so the system has to integrate with Google Classroom. If you don't know what Google Classroom is, that is perfectly okay. As long as you know where to find the assignments and the grades, you're good to go. But it also needs to ease the process for you to communicate with your teachers or to communicate with me and be able to find out the latest information. And then we've also outlined some more specific guidelines. And what that means is you need to be able to see that the grade books are updated on a regular basis and that students are seeing the responses, the graded assignments as quickly as possible. But I will say that our teachers, especially our English teachers, when they assign those essays, they are very thorough and accurate to provide quality responses, but that takes time. I will now field some questions around instruction. Ms. King, what do we got?
Yes. So what is the number of students in each class?
That's going to range. Just as if we were in a traditional setting. Classes can range anywhere from 15, 16 students all the way up to 32 on a regular basis. What that means is that at half capacity, the max size would be 16 per room.
Okay. And then do we have plans to be able to change or pivot back to teaching like pre-COVID? And what would that require?
In order to go back to pre-COVID, what a great question, by the way. In order to go back to pre-COVID, what's going to have to happen is most likely, and I'm going out on a ledge here, is that it's most likely going to require a vaccine. And that the vaccine is widely used by most people within the Bay Area or California before we go into a pre-COVID-like learning situation. Believe me, that would be my first choice. I would love to go back to that as quickly as possible because I just know how dynamic our classrooms are and how effective our teachers are with your children. But we do know that there's some challenges out there and we just have to be patient and continue to let the science guide us into the right decisions.
And is there any chance that we could transition to digital whiteboards as standard physical whiteboards are hard to follow and see through live stream?
That is a great question, and I'm glad you brought that up. We will definitely be looking into that. I have a couple of teachers who want to use some digital whiteboards, and that would be a great solution. And there's some also ways within live streaming to be able to do that. And so I will look at that answer and continue to research that to get that put into place. What a great concept.
Thank you. And since the days are going to be longer, particularly for students who do have a 7th period, do longer days with each class equal less homework?
Yeah, we put in some guidelines around maximum homework amounts per teacher. But please remember, if your child is taking an AP or college level course, there are some requirements and there's some coverage in order to fully prepare the student for those exams. So while a sociology course might have 20 or 30 minutes of homework, you might see an AP course with more homework than those 20 or 30 minutes. Let's do 2 more and then we'll move on to the next section.
Perfect. Are the live streams going to be recorded?
Yes, that was the really exciting part. How many times have we been able, have we been having wanted a student or a family to be able to see that lesson and to be able to watch that lesson again? If you can imagine the quadratic formula in your head, with the a is squared and plus minus 4 and etc. To be able to watch a teacher do that and then do it again and do it again as many times until you get it, that's really the dream scenario. And so this is going to really be awesome, and that we can archive those lessons. You can go back and look at that lesson. Again, I'm going to put a little asterisk there. This is getting new to us, and so you're just going to be patient with us as we get these systems up and running. Let's do one more question and get some more to cover.
Perfect. How are we What's the plan to address social emotional effects, as these changes are going to be dramatic for students, particularly like incoming 7th graders and new kids to the school?
Yeah, wow. Whoever asked that question gets a gold star. The social emotional learning is a really important part of making sure that we are supporting students through this journey. It is tough. There is a lot of stress. If you're a young person and you're learning about the world and you're about to become the next generation that is going to solve the world's problems, seeing all of this impact of COVID and this isolation, and not everyone has the answers to all of these questions, it's a stressful experience for our students. And so what you will see is that every Thursday, we will be presenting not only preparation and prevention methods for COVID, so that we are reminding students about all of the different risks and all the different measures, but also providing social emotional learning opportunities for students. And what those social emotional learning opportunities are is, again, just checking in with students, making sure they're doing okay with all the processes. We got a little bit more to cover, and there's still time to ask more questions. So what is the impact for you as part of this, as for students and for families? One thing we're asking all families to do is to ask and to pre-screen, just to make sure that students, if they have a elevated temperature or a fever of 100.4 or higher, is please keep them at home. We have changed our policies, and the state has changed their policies on recording on attendance issues related to COVID or being able to excuse absences due to illness. And so we're asking families to check in with their students every day before they come to school around signs of illness, and just to make sure that they are protected against, that they have all of their PPE before they leave the house. I don't know about you, but how many times have you been called to deliver someone's homework or binder or whatever? The one thing we can't leave the house with is without that PPE. But we are prepared for that just in case, and we will have disposable surgical masks available if a student forgets theirs. We will also be giving every student a cloth mask that they can take home and wash every single day. Students, I just want to spend some time on masks. The county is saying, and this is important, is that middle and high school students must use a cloth face covering when in classrooms, even if they are in a stable classroom cohort. That's from the county. That's the county health. In order for us to hold school, everyone has to wear a mask. Staff have to wear a mask. We'll talk about staff a little bit more. But if your child has issues with asthma or other medical conditions, please speak with your doctor. And if you have a doctor's note, please send it in to me or to Ms. McClung, and we will be able to help you work through the mask issue and come up with a solution. That's an important part. And one of the other things around masks is we're also providing face shields for our teachers. If you don't know, I am half deaf. I have a cochlear implant in one ear. I rely on people's facial expressions to be able to really communicate and understand how people are responding to me. If you have a child that is having hearing issues, please, you have to communicate with me or with the teachers to be able to remind, and I can send out messages to our teachers to make sure that we can use those face shields, and so that the student can see the full face of their teacher. It's just gonna be a really important thing that we just wanna make sure that that option is out there for them, that we're thinking about all of the different scenarios that students are experiencing. Again, another place that we really need help. Wash hands at home, remind them to wash hands. We're always just gonna be washing hands. We're gonna have outdoor hand washing stations. We have hand sanitizer everywhere you turn around. cover your face and cough into your elbow, and keep that social distancing, and then help with the cleaning protocols as well. And so then we're going to be asking students to follow these every day. Throughout the day, again, social distancing, practicing that. We are going to take it seriously. We are going to be patient with every student. We don't mind reminding them over and over and over again, but we could definitely use your help to enforce that policy. And it's about us as a community. We can keep COVID off of campus if we're all following these protocols together. Preparing for distance learning.
How can you, excuse me, how can you say that you excuse me, how can you say that you
Yeah, I think the best way for you to ask a question, if you can can you type it into the chat and we'll answer your question right after this section? Is that all right? Yeah, so any questions that you have, please ask them at the time. Please put them in the chat and we'll make sure we answer every question. To prepare for distance learning really requires that we maximize home bandwidth if possible. Increase the number of devices, have a specific or dedicated space, and ensure that everyone can access the learning management system. And what that means is, again, can they log on? Can they find the grades? Can they find the assignments? Can they connect with the staff? You don't have to solve this problem alone. We are here to help you with that. We have laptops, we have hotspots, we have resources for financial support to increase home bandwidth, and we'll have parent training in the fall to make sure that you have all of the tools necessary to help. So some of the questions that come up, continue to come up, and we just make sure that we're answering these questions before we answer questions you might have come up recently. School starts August 13th. And what have we done so far to prepare the school for safety? I won't go through all of these, but some of the things that just really are important. The idea was that we just think through every aspect of teaching and learning. From the moment a student gets out of the car, steps onto campus, goes into their classroom, participates in a lesson, leaves the classroom, and then what do they do when they're at home to make sure that they're participating in the classroom? And there's other aspects of this, like barring visitors and guests. It's frustrating and sad, but we're going to have to cancel field trips. There's strict limitations on extracurricular activities. We're holding back athletics and drama activities. It's going to require us to kind of think about what is the most important part for the teaching and learning experience. And so what are the daily precautions I need to take as a family? Again, we're just asking everyone to pull together to encourage the use of face coverings. And again, it's not about protecting the individual, it's to protect the community. It's not about the individual as much as it is that loved one at home that you might or might not know is immunocompromised. To be a willing participant and support in the protocols and guidelines we've established, to participate in those daily screening protocols. And again, I want to make sure that you know that you have an open door to me, to send me an email, phone call, whatever. Let's talk about the concerns that you have and make sure that we're adapting to the needs of you and your family. In these situations, so much of this is individual, and making sure that we understand your concerns is really important. In terms of extracurricular activities, because we can't put on events, we can still practice in some of these events. Obviously, there's limitations on singing or sound or aerosol generating activities, but it doesn't mean that we can't stop from practicing in social distance situations or continue with athletic practices. But just understand, we are still in phase one of our protocols, and phase one is really about making sure that everybody is is practicing safe distance. So right now volleyball is practicing, but it's a cohort of 12. They are no closer than 6 feet from each other. They are not allowed to have any contact or share ball practice. The coach has to be cleared, and there are strict protocols on how long the practice can be and how the students can enter and exit through the building, and the pre-screening that has to occur before practice. What do I need to provide for my child? Not sharing is caring in this new world. The days of, hey, can I borrow a pen or a pencil? We will provide pens and pencils. We'll have as many as possible, but we're just asking that students bring their own on a regular basis: calculators, pens, pencils, colored pencils, paper, binder, and then obviously we have our school uniform. If you have any issues in providing any of the equipment needed for your child to succeed in school, please reach out. Ms. Yariela Perez is amazing. She's our business manager, and she has a ton of resources and can put together learning packages for your child to make sure that they have everything they need to be successful. Our mission is to make sure that your child succeeds in college. And in order to do that, we are ready to provide all of the different assistance that's needed. What if I want to continue distance learning full-time for my child? We understand that. I have spoken with families where they have immunocompromised members in their family, and they have great concern about sending their child to school and potentially increasing the risk. I understand that. You are still part of the UPA family. And so we will support families that choose to continue with distance learning. With the live streaming that we had talked about before, they can still participate with their teachers that they're expecting to take as if we were pre-COVID. They would just do that from 100% from home. Where live streaming is not an option, we do have a partnership with Edgenuity, and we do have a staff member who will help oversee Edgenuity. Families who want to participate in full-time distance learning, and we do want your feedback, because we'll be sending out a questionnaire and asking for your feedback for any family between July 15th and July 23rd. At that time, you can request to go to full-time distance learning. It's important for us to know so that we get you connected to the right service that will support you and your child and your goals. One thing that we want to make a note of early on when you're thinking about doing distance learning, families are discouraged from but allowed to move between distance learning and in-class learning. This is more about those students who are taking Edgenuity classes. It's not always easy for a student to go from an Edgenuity math analysis class to a math analysis class taught by Ms. Woostrow, because they might be at different paces. And so what we just ask is that you are thinking about going to distance learning, or you're thinking about switching to in-class learning, please speak with your academic counselor. Our counselors are standing by and they're ready to answer your questions around what is going to be the right learning environment for your child. Edgenuity does have limited AP course offerings, but they will not provide as much in-class instruction and support as does our live stream option. We still believe that the best educations for a student is in a classroom with our staff, but I'll circle back to the top. This is an individual case by family, and we want to make sure that you feel supported and that you can make the right decision for your family. And we have the tools, the capability to be able to make that work for you and your family. The staff requirements, and I'll quickly run through those. Every staff member has to go through daily temperature screening and be able to do the same affidavit we're asking of our students. Teachers are required at all times, or all staff members are required at all times to wear a face mask or a shield, or both, that they use hand sanitation, they enforce the no sharing policy, they participate in the cleaning, and we also have other supports for our staff and for our students: disposable gloves, the elimination of paper-based assignments, practice distance learning while students are in the classroom, and to be prepared in case we have to go into some sort of full distance learning. Another best case scenario or a recommendation from a family member was that there are some medical professions that are handing out lab coats to even office personnel. And what that does is we can allow the teacher to wear one more layer of clothing, and they could just take that off, and it reduces the risk of taking home a viral particle on their regular clothes. And that is an option that we'll provide for our staff. In the case that there is an outbreak, it really depends on the size of the outbreak. If we're talking about someone who is potentially in contact and they have to self-quarantine, we have distance learning. If a student contracts COVID or a teacher contracts COVID, we then have to do the track and trace. And what that means is we'll ask for full participation from the family in terms of what the student's schedule was, who they might have had contact with at the school, and that will help us work with the health department to determine what the possible next step is. In some cases, it'll just be that single student self-quarantine, and they'll go into distance learning for those 2 weeks. If it's larger than that, it could be a number of students or a class of students, or in the worst case scenario, that there are multiple people with COVID, we would have to go into a full distance learning or school shutdown model. And again, these outlines, and really what's going to drive our decision making is our collaboration with the county health department and the county office of ed. Let's say someone says that they have to self-quarantine because they have COVID. It's important that they get a COVID test, and then they can return to school after 72 hours of the resolution. Meaning, if they got a test on Monday and it came back negative on Tuesday, we still have to go another 72 hours before they return. It's with live streaming, it's going to allow the student to continue participating in the class even though they're at home. Okay, you're almost there. How will you ensure that the protocols are being taken care of? There's a couple of things that I just want to touch on, is that I really strongly believe as a leadership models that we have to lead by example. So you're going to see the leaders of the school, the administrators wearing masks, following the one-way protocols, working with students, checking on classrooms to make sure that we're following all of the guidelines. We're going to increase the number of staff to make sure that we can carry out the pre-screening, the temperature testing. And then I have designated an audit committee that is separate of the administration, but reports directly to me. And they're going to be going through the county protocols, and that was in the guideline, to make sure that we have all the proper signage, that we're following all of the rules and guidelines from the county, and that when we earn our blue check, it's because we are doing all of the right procedures. What I am fully imagining is that this is going to take some processes and some time to make sure that that we adjust to all of those processes, and it's going to be a lot of retraining. How long do you see this lasting? At this point, if we're waiting for a vaccine, we're looking at a year. Do you foresee a full school closure? We have the opportunity, if we can follow through on all of our protocols, to be able to keep the school community going as long as possible. It's really, the question is it if or when? It's most likely when. At some point, do I foresee another situation like we just went through in March? No, I don't know if the community or the state is going to end up in a similar situation, but I do know at some point, I do expect at some point that the UPA will have to go into some sort of 2-week self-quarantine process. It sounds like a lot of staff training. Are you ready? We have expanded our summer training for our staff from 3 days to 5. And as of this morning, just kind of thinking through it, we're going to add another 2 optional days to make sure our staff really feel comfortable and confident that they can deliver instruction safely. How will you be training students on following through with the protocols? We mentioned that weekly seminar, and we also, if you remember that calendar, you saw that we're going to spend the month of August making sure that your students are ready to go into distance learning successfully. you have made it. Congratulations. But I want to make sure that I answer as many questions as possible. With the guideline that right now it's about 7:45, so we'll answer as many questions until 8:05. And if I don't answer all of those questions, I guarantee you I will answer them and put them on online, or you can email me and I'll be more than happy to either set up a meeting with you or answer your questions via email. Emma, what do you got, Ms. King?
Yes. So are all students required to wear masks?
The county guideline says that students are required to wear masks on campus in order for in-person learning to take place. But they do have a rider in there saying that if a student is having difficulty breathing or incapacitated or has a medical condition, they can avoid wearing a mask. We don't want to put someone in a situation where they have to wear a mask and then it causes some other secondary health issue. The important thing is in those situations is that those families work with their physician and bring a doctor's note to let us know what it is that is going to work best for them. In the case that a student forgets to wear a mask, we have plenty of disposable masks and other PPE to hand out just in case they forget, they drop it, lose it, whatever. We know that those things happen.
And will students be changing for PE?
We are still looking into that. At this point, it's not a requirement to change for PE. What I do know is that having the proper attire for physical education is important. But changing for PE requires students to be in a confined space. And if we cannot guarantee social distancing, then students will not be required to change for PE and it'll be optional. But the grade will not be based on whether they dress out or not.
Can students wear their own PPE rather than that which is provided by the school?
At this point, yes. The outline, and again, this is going to be important that the students and the families speak with Mr. McMahon to be able to determine what are the appropriate attire for the physical education classes. So once we get to the point of starting the school year, his syllabus will outline specifically what those requirements would be in order to make sure the student can perform the activity safely.
When and how can families request a hotspot?
We are about another week away from being able to make sure that the hotspots were cleaned and ready to go. But after, I would say after July 15th, we'll be able to start handing out those hotspots.
Is there a difference between ammonia versus ammonium?
Without getting too much into the chemistry, ammonia and ammonium are very closely related. It determines how many hydrogen particles are connected to a nitrogen particle. I won't go too crazy. But what that basically means is ammonium dries more quickly in the air because it will bind with oxygen and molecules easier and be able to dry faster, meaning that the cleaning takes less time.
And which one is in the aerosol that we're using?
Ammonium.
Perfect. And are students, so can students bring their own masks to school rather than the one provided by school?
Absolutely. I'm guessing that that face masks are going to become fashionable. And we will also be sending out some guidelines around face masks in terms of making sure that they are pattern neutral and that they are sports neutral, meaning that they're most likely going to be some sort of solid color. That's what we'd recommend.
Okay. And since families can choose to be 100% at learning distance, why are we still exceeding the requirements? It
depends on what we mean by the exceeding the requirements. If we're talking about medical screening, while the county health department says that taking temperature is optional, I believe that if we go through all of the possible steps and just do one more check, it's not going to interrupt the learning process, but it will still allow for students to walk onto campus feeling safe, and that we have done everything we possibly could have to ensure the safety and health of every student. In terms of other specifics, in terms of if you can include any other or add to the chat or send me an email about other requirements, please do so. It sounds like we might have more to talk about.
What if there's an emergency? How will we handle that, like a typical fire drill or other things like that?
Yeah, so fantastic question. We are going to still continue to do our emergency drills. We still have to be prepared for fire, earthquake, for run, hide, defend events, and ensure that not only are we working with protecting the health of your child from COVID, but we also need to make sure that we're prepared for other catastrophic events as well. So those practices will continue on. And we're revising how often those happen to make sure that make sure the A group and the B group gets the same experience and same preparation. We're just gonna have to do it slightly differently with social distancing, and that'll change some of our protocols slightly, but before we went into COVID, Mr. Yao had done an amazing job to create safe barriers that are going to be approved by the fire department and the sheriff's department and the police department to be able to create defendable barriers in every single classroom. So we're really excited by his plans for continued safety on campus.
And what about oxygen levels for students wearing a mask, particularly just with like being able to focus, and if oxygen levels drop, that makes it harder?
If a student is becoming incapacitated or feeling dizzy or having difficulty to breathe, the county has provided that guideline saying that they can remove the mask in those situations. We do not want to put a student at risk because they are wearing a mask. Yeah, but that's why we have those secondary precautions with the plexiglass desk sneeze guards, and having the teacher wear potentially a face mask and a face shield and a mask. But I think, again, it comes down to each individual student and what they're most comfortable with. And please check with your physician about what is going to be the best approach for your child. And we're more than willing to work with you on that situation.
And if the county deems it acceptable to go back to full 100% kids in classes, how will the school be in line with the county, or will the school potentially stay at a hybrid model longer?
If the county says that we can go back into full pre-COVID teaching learning experiences, we would have another meeting like this to outline our plan and to describe how we have revised our safety protocols. The ideal would be that we return to full in-class model, but we have to do that safely. But we will follow the guidelines of the county. But again, I think what's going to happen is that it is a conversation between the community of UPA and UPA to determine what is the safest next steps. But I'm all for, if we can start creating safe spaces for students and return to what we call as normal, that we return to that. But even in that situation, we're definitely going to see some changes to teaching and learning because of this experience.
We're getting towards the end. And then what about lengthening passing periods or staggering them to keep the halls from jamming?
The one-way pathways, we've looked through that, and what we're really thinking is by creating that flow, we're going to be able to keep the hallways from jamming, and with increased staff helping with student movements. If we are seeing that there is a need to change the bell schedule, we will revise that and look at ways to be able to help and make those adjustments. But right now we're feeling that a student can get from one point of the campus to the next within the bell schedule once the day has started. Where I think the big challenge is going to be is in the first couple of weeks for first period and getting students to first period on time through the pre-screening protocols as parents start to adjust the new drop-off locations and how quickly we can get people through the queue. And that's why those thermal imaging cameras are so important, to be able to check temperature of multiple students at once.
Why are we treating the guidelines as mandates with a virus that has such a high survival rate?
The virus, as we understand it, feels like, in terms of what we understand, changes, and our knowledge about the virus continues to change. I'm not a doctor, nor am I in a laboratory as a scientist. What I'm trying to do is provide protocols and guidelines that we can ensure equity and safety for all students. As we get to know more information, those guidelines are going to have to change. So I'm not seeing them as hardcore rules as much as they are as these are the steps that we want to take to ensure safety as we know information today. And hopefully everyone can bear with us as we learn new information. But the goal is, what can we do to achieve our mission to provide a high quality education for your child and do it safely? And right now, the biggest key piece, I think, is the social distancing and the personal PPE.
And are bathrooms going to be monitored to ensure that students are following social distancing?
That's going to be a challenge, to be quite honest. There are a lot of rules and guidelines and best practices of whether or not adults can go into bathrooms. And that is going to be a big question mark for us in terms of how we solve that problem. And so that's going to come from education first, and making sure that we have people near the restrooms to make sure not too many students go in at this particular time. And that students understand what is at risk during this time. We're going to be asking the students to be full participants in protecting the community, and that's tough work, but we're up to the task.
With how early what time does the drop off open, as well as are there going to be any after school programs now?
Two really important questions. We know that some families have, in order to get to work on time, they need to drop their students off early. We're looking at the earliest right now is about 7:30 to have the check-in location set up. So between 7:30 and obviously 8:15, you can drop your child off to have them check in. We want to be able to start school directly at 8:15, but we know that that's going to take some learning, some time to get used to that. In terms of after-school activities, those are greatly reduced, and they are limited to groups of 12, and they are cohorts of 12, meaning that if the debate club wants to meet and they determine that these are the 12 people in that cohort, they'll be allowed to meet with their after-school teacher or coach, but we can't allow new students to enter once that cohort starts. And that's a really important part of these after-school activities. But for the most part, after-school activities are greatly reduced. And for club activities during lunchtime or club meetings, a lot of them will be moving to virtual meetings after school.
And questions about whether we could have grades alternate to have all of the 7th and 8th graders on campus one day, and then have specific grades all on campus at once.
That's a great question, and it's a model that we looked at. The challenge for us in that situation is that we have one teacher who's teaching 7th grade English. In order to make that happen, we'd have to have 2 teachers teaching 7th grade English in order to do social distancing. So even if we had all 7th and 8th graders show up with social distance, we'd either have to double our staff in order to have all of that happening at once, or half of those students would still have to stay at home. It's a real conundrum, and I'm more than happy to walk you through all of the different scenarios that we looked at. But the key is making sure that we can social distance to the best of our ability in every single classroom. And the model that seemed to work the best is the one that I've sent you so far.
And how are we going to train students to maintain distance and wear masks during lunch?
That's going to take a lot of staff. And so we're going to have to increase the amount of support staff we have on campus to be walking around. The administration is going to have to be out and about quite a bit, interacting with students, talking with them, reminding them about wearing masks. And the adults on campus have to lead by example and to exhibit all of the PPE and to reinforce that with students. It's going to get tiring because it's a constant process of reminding people about wearing masks and social distancing, and it's going to get frustrating to have to constantly repeat that. We just have to keep in our mind as the adults on the campus that this is a new behavior, and we just have to keep retraining it. And that's where we're asking families to help remind them at home as well.
And is the school going to be purchasing more tables or outside seating?
We are looking into that at this point. We're also looking at, as we mentioned earlier, some sunshades as well, and looking at different ways to do seating, potentially benches or other types of furniture that are easy to clean, easy to maintain, and easy to social distance. And so we're looking at options right now. We're also upgrading a lot of the classroom furniture to be able to make sure that some of the collaborative tables are moving back towards a more individual student desk as well. So I think the question on furniture is a great question to make sure that we're thinking in that mindset.
Mm-hmm. And what happens if a student isn't wearing a mask?
The first step in terms of working with a student, we'll remind them to wear a mask. Remember, if a student is not wearing a mask because of a medical condition, it's important that the family communicate that with us so we do not constantly bother the student about wearing a mask. We'll ask a student to put on their mask in a respectful manner. And if they do not have a mask, we'll provide a mask for them. If they continue to refuse, that goes into a different realm around insubordination. And but what I can tell you is that working with the students that this year, we have a great student community, and I think the students understand what we're up against right now. It's not about just protecting themselves. It's not an individual task or action. It's about protecting the rest of the community. It's about protecting someone they don't even know who might be immunocompromised at home.
Okay. And then how often will we be discussing the changes to guidelines?
We have one more session on Tuesday. And at this point, it's looking like the guidelines are pretty much set at this point. If you have specific things that you think need to be adjusted or looked at, again, this is a community effort. And if you're seeing something that we are missing, please reach out to myself, reach out to Ms. King, and we will take your suggestions, ideas, or questions to heart. And if we can implement them, we will. The core value of the entire document, it's a giant document, so I thank everyone for reading through it if you got through it. The core situation is social distancing and PPE. That's really what it's about, is how do we create social distancing? How do we create a safe space as students get to a classroom, get out of classroom, and move around the campus? That's really what it's coming down to. So if you wanted to break it down into one poster, it's really about social distancing, PPE, and pre-screening every single day. And those are the, if you want to reduce it down to the most tangible aspects, those are the most key pieces. The offshoot of that is we can't have every student on campus and social distance. So we're providing distance learning and live streaming as a way for students who are at home, who can't come onto campus that day or that week, to participate still in the classroom setting. And I'm really excited by looking at that as an option for students. What I can tell you is that we're going to continue to get better and better and better at this process, so that we don't lose our mission while we're trying to fight this virus.
If hybrid learning continues into the second semester, will the groups be staying the same?
That is the recommendation, is to keep cohorts together. We can talk about that. If there are individual situations or issues, we can look at those types of adjustments. Because everyone's getting the same type of instruction, we'll be able to more fluidly move a student from an A section to a B section, or A or B group. But I think at this point, we did not have any plans for mixing up the groups. But I will say that I've received emails from a few students who have some concerns about missing out on their student groups or their peer groups if they're not in the same A group or B group. And I hear them, and so I know that that is a concern of some of our students.
Okay. And again, can you just revisit how we are addressing the psychological and social well-being of staff and students in this time?
Absolutely. Our current process is that we have seminar every Thursday, and we'll be continuing that practice. And so if students are in A group or B group, they'll still be able to distance and to live stream into their seminar class. And so the seminar classes will be covering two topics. We're really reducing it down to the most important aspects. One is we want to arm our students with the most accurate information so that they can be active participants in stopping the spread of COVID. The other part is that we are looking at social emotional learning platform and the seminar classes. And a lot of the social emotional learning is centered around making sure that students feel connected to the teacher, they feel connected to the school, they feel connected to the peers, and that they have a place to really begin to explore the concerns that they have, be able to look at the different types of issues that come up and arise from social distancing. I will tell you, speaking with students last semester, it was palpable. The frustration and the isolation is really challenging on young people. The most important things that seem to happen in the middle school and high school years is socialization and adaptation. And to miss out on that is really causing some concerns for many of our students. and so we really need to invest in what that's into the social emotional learning. One of our counselors, Ms. Buenaceso, who's amazing, is looking at some terrific SEL or social emotional learning curriculum that is going to really empower our students to take charge of their lives and to be able to do some of the self-inventory that we do as adults when we're in really stressful situations. If we can have students graduating being able to really set some goals and understand what those obstacles are, what those stressors are, and be able to respond positively, then we've done our job. Let's do one more. I know we went a little bit over.
Okay. When will students know their class schedules and whether they are an A or B group? And I'm also just going to group another one in there because I'm cheating, which is if we start with a student in class and in the hybrid model, can we pull them to 100% at home?
So let's, first of all, we're having to make a few adjustments to the schedule because, again, we were set pre-COVID to go into a block schedule, and now we're going into a all period, all classes, every day schedule. And so that's delaying us a little bit, but we're looking at the last week of July to be able to hand out schedules. And at that time, you'll be able to see what group you are in. What's going to take us a little bit extra time as well is to go through all of the different family connections to make sure that students who are within a family but in different grade levels are set in the same group. We would like to be able to do that and have to do that before you get those schedules, because we want to make sure that you don't have to go out of your way to get schedule changes in terms of A group or B group. So I would expect that we would get that the last week of July. As we finalize a few final adjustments. Can a student go from distance learning to in-class or in-class to distance learning? If they're participating in the live stream, it's going to be the easiest transition. If a student goes from in-class teaching or in-class learning, the hybrid model, and goes 100% into Edgenuity, that's going to be a tough transition, and by far the hardest transition would be going from Edgenuity, starting in Edgenuity, and then transitioning into the in-class hybrid model or the live stream model. So the easiest process is to participate in the live streaming distance learning. But again, if you are thinking about going into 100% distance learning, you do not have to make that decision alone. Please reach out to our counselors or to myself or to the administration, and we'll be able to help guide you in that decision making and make sure that you are supported in that decision. There is no wrong decision. The only thing we want to do is make sure that your child is taken care of and that they're going to achieve that goal. I take that slogan of making college, the dream of college, reality very seriously and personally, and that's my goal at the end of the day. And it takes step-by-step process to make that happen. With that being said, this has been a really interesting year. It's been quite a way to indoctrinate myself into the UPA culture, starting with a reauthorization, jumping right into wildfires and mass power outages, and then falling into an epidemic. Thank you for all of that. But really, at the end of the day, I've loved every single day. The community on this campus is something special. We have something that's really unique, and I've really enjoyed the opportunity to be part of this experience, to be part of this community. It's not just the students at school. It's the support that you as parents give to your students and to our staff that really empowers us to keep pushing hard. Teachers don't teach in silos. They teach based on the energy of their students and the support of the community. that's what makes UPA special, and that's what makes me excited to continue facing these challenges. Sometimes they seem impossible, but it's really, it's a lot of fun, and it's really empowering to be able to know that the work that we are doing is to support you and to support your child's dreams. So thank you for